a great honor to welcome everybody to this second Brian Ward Memorial Lecture Series. We're so pleased with the attendance with so many different experts from so diverse backgrounds. Today we're very honored to have the Met Services from 5 different countries in the region here with us today. And also we are very glad to see the senior officials from UNESCAP, from UNICEF, from USAID, from FRC, of course, from our dear friend at the ECHO office as well. And of course, this is also our great pleasure to have the representative from the Bangladesh Embassy and also the Royal Norwegian Embassy here in Thailand as well. And I will just spend a few minutes to elaborate a little bit about the Brian Ward Memorial Lectures. The Brian Ward Memorial Lecture is a series of lectures to honor the memory of Brian Ward, the founding father of Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, or ADPC, for his great wisdoms and outstanding personal dedication and commitment to the field of disaster risk reduction. This annual series features platforms for distinguished guest lecturers to share their experiences that will contribute to the innovative initiatives on disaster risk reduction in the Asian and Pacific region. And today is our great honor to have Dr. Jan Egeland to be with us today as the guest speaker. Dr. Jan Egeland is the former chairperson of the High-level Taskforce for the Global Framework for Climate Services. He now serves as the Deputy Executive Director for Human Rights Watch and also the Director for the European Operation. Prior to joining Human Rights Watch, Dr. Jan Egeland was the Executive Director of the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. And as the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinators from 2003 to 2006, Dr. Egeland helped reform the global humanitarian response systems and organize the international response to the Indian Ocean tsunami, as well as the crisis from Darfur to the Democratic Republic of Congo and Lebanon. In 2006, the Time magazine named Dr. Egeland as one of the 100 people who shape our world. From 1999 to 2002, he was the UN Secretary General's Special Advisor on Colombia. And from 1990 to 1997, he was the State Secretary in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dr. Egeland has over 30 years of experiences from international work with human rights, humanitarian situations, and conflict resolution. And it was among the initiators of the peace negotiation that led to the Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization in 1993. Now please give a warm round of applause to welcome Dr. Jan Egeland.
Thank you very much indeed, ambassadors, correspondents, colleagues, President of the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. It's a great honor to be here and to hold the Brian Ward Memorial Lecture. Brian Ward was the important creator and builder of this important Disaster Preparedness Center. I saw today how important the center is in our meeting with the countries of the region discussing climate change, disaster risk, and what can be done, should be done to reduce the disaster risk in this region. It's also good to be in the Foreign Correspondents Club. There are not so many, as an old journalist I say that, there are not so many of these clubs left, and you should really try to nurture and maintain this one, complete with the bar and everything. I think it means a lot for the environment generally in a city like Bangkok. So I would like to use the next 40 minutes of our lives to go through some of the main challenges connected to climate change, and one of the possibilities there is to try to alleviate the worst consequences of climate change, and that is the climate services program, climate services system that I helped to to develop. We did a major report last year. It was published. This was done on behalf of the World Meteorological Organization and the UN system. It was a high-level task force consisting of experts from all continents, and we issued a report, Climate Knowledge for Action, a global framework for climate services, empowering the most vulnerable, as a proposal to the member states of the United Nations. It has been endorsed now by the Congress of the World Meteorological Organization, and hopefully there will be implementation. Let's start by looking at ourselves. This is the world. This is world population. It's a good map. It was made by the National Geographic last year. A lot of color, a lot of light means a lot of people. You will see not only how heavily populated Western Europe is, the east coast of America, but certainly also East Asia, China, and India, and the Asian subcontinent, and increasingly Sub-Saharan Africa. We're now 7 billion people. If you are, like me, born around 1960, you were born when the 3rd billion was born on Earth. World population reached 3 billion around when I was born. When my mother was born, the 2nd billion was born also globally. And it had taken 1 million years to reach those 2 first billion. And then in 1 generation, we reached the 3rd. And since I was born, there has been a new billion every 12.5 years. And it will continue till I die around 2045, 50, when world population will peak just above, many estimate, above 9 billion people. So in 1 lifetime, world population will triple. It has never happened before in human history, and it will never happen again. So, of course, this is one of the reasons why we have climate change, why we have environmental problems. The other reason is economic growth. The blue nations are from 13 to 100 times richer than the yellow ones. But the reddish and the violet ones are from 3 to 13 times richer than the yellow ones. And if we went back a generation, nearly all of the world would be yellow, which is basically less than $1,000 per capita per year. That is the other explanatory factor. The enormous economic growth and the enormous industrialization, and of course the blue ones, but increasingly then the red ones and the violet ones have created all of this greenhouse effect. However, you know, the UN did conclude in its report on human development in 2010 that we've had 40 years of progress for humankind. I mean, what is this? These are trend lines for 135 nations where we have good data on education, life expectancy, health, and purchasing power, economy. So of the 135 or 37 nations, all but 3, I mean 132, has had either progress or a lot of progress in this period. More education, better health, longer life expectancy, less child mortality means that we are making progress. However, there is this however, the world has never been more unjust in terms of the distance between the blue and the richest and the poorest on earth. So my nation is, with $60,000 per capita plus per capita per year, 100 times richer than the poorest nations. That has never happened before either in human history. One of the most unjust sides of this unjust world is, and that's what is the matter of life or death, is that climate change is already having a tremendous effect. Not on all of us, but on the most vulnerable. The bottom 1 to 2 billion. And already it's creating death, destruction, misery, displacement, massively among the most vulnerable. Now, part of the progress, but also part of this injustice in services and in knowledge, are connected to science, knowledge, observation about what is happening with our climate. What is this? These are the observation stations that take in weather and climate information regularly around the world. If the dot is blue, it provides continuous information 90 to 100% of the time. If it's yellow, if it's green, it's from 45 to 90% of the information that is available. And if it's red, it is a silent station. Is there any trend here? Yes, there is a very clear trend that some parts of the world is super well covered with information, with data of what is happening, and other parts are very inadequately covered. And those parts who are worst covered are some of the most disaster-prone regions where the most vulnerable live. So again, part of the climate injustice that we will discuss more and more, I think, is that those who cause climate change and who are last and least hit get all the information to become more robust for the consequences of climate change, and those who did not cause climate change, because they had no economy to produce greenhouse gases, they are hit first and hardest, and they do not have information to adapt themselves to what will hit them. We did, as part of the work of this task force, a survey of meteorological and climatological stations, centers around the world. And we saw that, again, the quality of and depth of the infrastructure is tremendously unequal in how it's spread. 6 nations on Earth have no meteorological or climatological services at all. 0. 65 have very inadequate. There is something, but it's really inadequate. Another 57, I think it was, have the essential services. 40 have full services, pretty good services. And another 23 nations are very advanced. So advanced that they are not only providing top weather and climate predictions and services for their own population, but they can also share with others. However, the main finding here is, of course, that that climate information, climate predictions, what will happen next season, when will there be another year of drought, or will there be a year of a lot of rain? Would it be El Nino effect? What effect will they have for us? All of that information does not reach the last mile to those who need it the most disaster prone. And I think that is also the reality for large communities in Southeast Asia, which have some countries who have come far in science and in knowledge, others who have come much less far in that regard, but I think all share the point that it's very hard to reach those who really need to know. And we concluded after all of this work and traveling that there is this enormous disconnect between the thousands and thousands of scientists who know more and more of what is happening and can predict more and more. There's a disconnect between those who know and those who need to know. The farmers, the health workers, the water managers, the vulnerable communities. Now, that is why we propose a new global approach to connect all of those who have those global computers, global modeling capacity, all of that information that can come together to a global climate knowledge, connect that, and hopefully have them provide services that can reach those in greatest need. Here's just some of the existing capacities and programs that are there that we can connect in a global framework for climate services. Now, in general, of course, science has come very far. It was also the conclusion this morning that, people will come from 20 years ago to a meeting among the meteorological services in Southeast Asia, and they would think this is science fiction. How can you know so much? How do you have all of that information about the effects of the monsoon, about how many typhoons are coming, about how some cities get less rain and water shortage, others are getting too much, etc. The effects of climate change is, of course, very freak. Some get more rain, some get less. The extremes become more extreme, etc. We often distinguish between 3 levels: weather services up to 1 to 2 weeks of very specific predictions of what will happen. And of course that is including when this storm will hit, that is now hitting first Vietnam and then Thailand this weekend. That's not a climate service, it's a weather service. And certainly this has been better and better, and most of the world is reasonably well covered with weather services. Then it's the climate variability, which are monthly, seasonal, and yearly forecasts. And then, on a more decade-long and century-long perspective, you predict the consequences of climate change. And even in terms of climate variability and climate change, much more can be predicted. You can now tell a water manager where to place a dam that will be providing large populations with energy, hydroenergy or water or irrigation for the next generations, you can say, well, in this part of the country, yes, it is expected that there will become more and more rain. And you can advise others to say, don't place it there, because it will get more and more dry. That is to predict climate change. So, the purpose of climate services is precisely this: better management of the climate variability and change that we know will come. Even in the best of scenarios, if all of these leaders finally sat down and agreed on something, there would be greater climate variability and change, even in the best of scenarios. This should lead to adaptation to climate change through science-based climate information and prediction into planning, policy and practice on the global, regional and national scales. And I won't bore you with many boxes here, but this is actually the one model of how the future climate services system should work, can work, and to some extent does work. The thousands of researchers that do modeling and prediction, connected with improved observations and monitoring, and there are now thousands and thousands and thousands of stations that take in information continuously, unfortunately more in the north than the south, but more and more around the globe, take in data on climate. This will lead to better climate information and prediction, and I'll explain how this will look like. But then, very importantly, we need this user interface which is not there. I mean, the greatest problem today is that there is no real dialogue between the experts and the users. I've seen it a couple of places. I've seen it in the United States and I've seen it in China, for example. Two of the places which are most advanced in climate services, where you see water managers and agricultural representatives and others sit and challenge the scientists and say, it's not good enough what you're providing us. You use language we don't understand. You use predictions which are really understandable and incomprehensible for our people. What does it mean that you say that there is a 75% for a reduction of 30% in precipitation for the next season? What does it really mean for me as someone advising doctors or farmers or whatever? All of that has to improve in a user interface, so that governments, the private sector, research, agriculture, water, health, construction, disaster reduction, environment, tourism, transport, etc., can get better information about what is happening, what will happen, how will weather and climate change. And it will happen on 3 levels, or rather within 3 domains. The global level. What's the global level? Well, that's really the supercomputers that are centered around the United States, China, Japan, and to a lesser extent also in Europe, India, a few other places. But say, for example, the US, China, and Japan have now global prediction capacity that they can put free of charge to the regional centers that downscale the global information to the regional level and to national predictions. And then hopefully there is a national level receiving this, so that they again can provide services to their population in these sectors I mentioned. Already there are emerging regional climate outlook forums. Some are good, some are not good, and some regions are not even covered. But the idea is to cover the whole world in regional climate outlook fora. And among the services that come are like these from one of the centers, ACMAD, an African center in the Sahel, that provide outlooks on where will you have extreme temperature swings in the future, where will there be a lot of rainfall, etc. And it's of course it's through maps, it's through easily accessible information. Here even sandstorms and so on for region. This is more short range rather than a real seasonal forecast. We said as a group panel that to make this really become a success, we have to show real progress in 4 areas: water management, disaster risk reduction, health, and agricultural food security. Take agriculture and food security. This is a service in India where on your cell phone, doesn't have to be Motorola, I think, on any cell phone that a farmer has, he will get in his language an advice for the season, when to plant, and even what crop they recommend to plant. There is some easily understood information of what will be the dominating climate in the next season, and some recommendations of what to do. Take this disaster risk management. And this part of the world is extremely disaster prone, natural disaster prone. We know that science-based risk prevention and response save a lot of life and property. I saw that when I was the global emergency relief coordinator. We spent 10 times more money and resources when we came in with emergency relief after a natural disaster than we did when we pre-planned through disaster preparedness and prevention. Better plant a few mangrove forests in Vietnam than send a lot of food to those who are hit by the typhoon. Because the number of disasters are clearly increasing. This is from the Center for Disaster Research in Europe, called CRED. I think they say that a disaster is more than 10 people killed or 100 people losing their home or their livelihood. So it means that a significant damage to lives